Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Week 4 in the books. Time to update the SEC Power Rankings heading into Week 5. And I think my first take is that you're starting to see that top tier really separate themselves from the rest of the teams in the SEC. You look at Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. They're just checking a lot of boxes. One, elite quarterback play for all five of those programs. But I think more importantly, what separates them is the line of scrimmage play. And I think specifically for Tennessee and Ole Miss, why are they legitimate title contenders in the SEC in 2024? They have the line of scrimmage play to do so. Now, Ole Miss, it's a little bit less proving because they haven't really played a team that's going to test them along the lines of scrimmage. They're probably going to get that test against Kentucky this weekend. But you look at Tennessee. I mean, just running the football all over NC State week 2. Then they go on the road to Oklahoma and completely smother them on the defensive side of the football. Tennessee and Ole Miss have always had explosive offenses, but what has separated them in the past is just not having the line of scrimmage play to compete with the likes of Georgia and Alabama. They have that in 2024. Now, I want to get into the rest of the tiers, the rest of the rankings. Now, before we do, and as always, to the SEC fans, I know there are some hot takes within these rankings. That's what it's about. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section, whether you agree with the takes, whether you disagree. That's the beauty of doing these rankings. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And again, you start with the title contenders. If you want to have Texas number one in the SEC, certainly would not die on that hill right now. That is going to kind of get figured out. But what I probably more want to focus on is these are the five teams that if you were to ask me who's winning the SEC, I'd be pretty confident in saying that it's going to be one of these five teams. You look at the quarterback play, you trust it for all five programs, really good quarterback play, in fact, and then you look at line of scrimmage play, really good for all those programs. Again, I have Ole Miss kind of at the back half of that title contender pack just because I want to see it on the football field. But you look at the personnel, you look at what it is on paper and say, it looks like a top end SEC team along the lines of scrimmage. That's been the difference for Ole Miss in 2024. Now you want to see it manifest on the football field. I want to dig into kind of the middle of the SEC, specifically Missouri and LSU. Missouri kind of started in that title contender tier. I thought they checked a lot of boxes, but I think a lot of Missouri fans would probably agree. From what we've seen from Missouri the last couple of weeks, they're not playing like a title contender. Now you look at Missouri and say, from a personnel standpoint, I think they have a legitimate offensive line. I think they got multiple guys on that offensive line that will be playing on Sundays over the next couple of years. Brady Cook's a veteran quarterback that we trust. You have one of the best wide receivers in the country in Luther Burden. I think the two question marks that we want to see answered is what does this Missouri defense look like against some of the more elite offenses that we see in the country? I think my biggest question mark for Missouri is what does this defensive front look like? They lost a lot of key guys. Well, Darius Robinson, most importantly, to the NFL draft. They've had some injuries and guys like Darius Smith heading into the season. You look at Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, and Ole Miss and say, elite line of scrimmage play on the defensive side of the football. Can we say the same thing for Missouri right now? I think that's kind of to be determined. And that's why I kind of knocked Missouri down from that title contender to that dark horse. But I will say this, I think Missouri has the capability of being a title contender, but we got to see it on the football field before we can put them back up into that tier. And then you look at LSU. LSU, really good offensive line, really good quarterback play. I think Garrett Nussmeier is a phenomenal quarterback. I think he's got weapons on the outside. I don't have any question marks about this LSU offense. That's why I have them as a dark horse in the SEC. If you can score the points that LSU can put up, you don't really have that many question marks on if they could compete at the top level of the SEC. I think my bigger question continues to be on the defensive side of the football. And what you're seeing from LSU on defense is I don't know if they have the personnel to run what Blake Baker wants to run in 2024. Now, I think it's going to get figured out in the next couple of years. That being said, Blake Baker wants to come in. He wants to bring a lot of pressure. He wants to put his defensive backs on islands. You go back to Blake Baker's time at Missouri, he had the defensive backs to do that. I don't know if LSU has the defensive backs to run what Blake Baker wants to run. Now, I'm a fan of them being more aggressive, trying to be a little bit more imposing on the defensive side of the football, but you need the personnel to do so. And from what you've seen the last couple of weeks, they're giving up what? 8.8 yards per pass attempt. That's 113th in the country. 65% completion percentage. That's 92nd in the country. Outside of USC, it's not like they've played elite passing attacks. I don't think UCLA is a very good offense at all, and they hung 17 in the first half. So again, they're going to be. I think they can compete at the top of the SEC because of how good that offense is in the quarterback play. But we still have massive question marks about the defense. You look at really the two things are what's the difference between the five teams at the top and the title contenders, and then the dark horses. The five teams at the top, there's not a ton of question marks about those teams. Now it's just going to come to, can you play your best football in the big moments when you're playing in the SEC? For Missouri and LSU, you still have some question marks about these two teams and whether they can compete at the top of the SEC. Going down to teams to watch, I think it starts with Texas A&M. And look, I'm a fan of Marcel Reed. I hope Marcel Reed is the guy for Texas A&M because I think he fits how Texas A&M wants to win football games in the SEC. I think they have a personnel on the defensive side of the football that can be one of the better units in the country. I think they're going to continue to get better on defense. You look at that really defensive line and say how many, from a personnel standpoint, how many defenses or defensive lines, I should say, are better than what Texas A&M has. They're creating a lot of havoc. The havoc numbers are incredible for Texas A&M. It hasn't necessarily come together. I think they have a really good defense. I think it will be a very good defense in 2024 as they get into SEC play. Why I think Marcel Reed should be the guy is you look at Texas A&M from a personnel standpoint. I don't think they have elite wide receivers, and I don't think their offensive line is elite in pass protection. I think the Texas A&M offensive line is much better in the run blocking department. So you look at how Texas A&M is going to win at the highest level in the SEC, playing good defense and running the football. What quarterback gives you the better opportunity to play good defense and run the football? I think it's Marcel Reed. And yeah, you saw some growing pains from a redshirt freshman playing against a MAC team in Bowling Green. I think we fully expected some of those growing pains, but I think his athleticism, I think, lets them run the football a little bit better. So Texas A&M's a team that, yeah, we still have question marks about, specifically on the offensive side of the football. We want to see the defense play a little bit better. But from a pure talent standpoint, they're certainly one of those teams that you got to keep an eye on. Oklahoma and South Carolina, to me, are very similar teams in terms of what we like and what we don't like. I just think Oklahoma's defense is a little bit better. You look at both Oklahoma and South Carolina, I think these defenses are quite good. South Carolina has one of the better pass rushes that we'll see not only in the SEC, but in the country. Oklahoma's defense, phenomenal against Tennessee. They gave that Oklahoma team every chance to win that football game, but the Oklahoma offense, just for lack of better terms, was incompetent for largely 3/4 of that football game. Oklahoma switching up the quarterbacks to Mike Hawkins. Look, I think that could give Oklahoma a little bit more juice on the offensive side of the football, but I think a lot of Oklahoma fans would agree with this point, and that is, look, Jackson Arnold wasn't great, but I don't think he was the number one problem in terms of what was going wrong with that Oklahoma offense. They can't run the football. They can't hold up in pass protection. That's a very bad recipe to winning high-end games in the SEC. Now, I think this Oklahoma defense makes them extremely dangerous in the SEC and will keep them in a lot of football games like they kept them in it against Tennessee in that first half. But if you can't run the football and pass protect against some of these elite defensive fronts that you're going to see in the SEC, it's going to be hard to consistently win football games. If Michael Hawkins can help them run the football a little bit more effectively with his athleticism as a true freshman, you could see Oklahoma potentially rise up these rankings. But as of right now, what I've seen from the offensive line, what I've seen from the run game, quite frankly, really banged up at wide receiver. I don't think they have the difference makers that they expected to have coming into the season outside of Deion Burks. It's hard to have Oklahoma as that dark horse right now. South Carolina, kind of similar conversation. I think the defense is quite good. Offensive line, you're starting a true freshman at left tackle. I think the jury's still out in terms of Lenore Sellers. You've seen him flash, but you haven't seen him on the football field consistently. And when you do see him on the football field, it's kind of a rocky road. It's not been perfect for Lenore Sellers. I'm almost more confident in South Carolina continuing to improve because I think the offensive line is just young. You know what I mean? When you have a starting left tackle that's a true freshman, You probably expect them to get better as the season goes along. I expect the quarterback play to get better as well. There's a lot of young players on the South Carolina team that are asked to be massive contributors for the South Carolina team on both sides of the football. If those guys get better as the season goes on, this is a South Carolina team that I think can be pretty dangerous in the SEC. Arkansas, another team that I would just qualify them as a dangerous roller coaster. Like you look at Taylor Green and say the highs for Taylor Green allowed Arkansas to be a dangerous team in the SEC, but the lows, are you necessarily betting on Taylor Green to consistently win you football games from what you've seen so far? Probably not. I think the offensive line is massively improved. They're running the football extremely well. Bobby Petrino might be the most impactful hire you've seen in the SEC. He's completely turned around this offense. And if you can limit the mistakes that Taylor Green is making, I think this offense can put up a lot of points. Then you look to the defensive side of the football. I want to see that pass rush get a little bit better. This was one of the better pass rush units that we saw in the country last year. Hasn't been as dominant as you would like. I think the linebacker play has been better. I think the secondary has been pretty solid, even though they've missed their number one cornerback for the last couple of weeks. Arkansas is not a consistent team right now, but they're a dangerous team. And if it kind of comes together, you got to kind of keep your eye on this Arkansas team going to the bottom half. Let's start with Kentucky. I think they got a really good defense, and I think we saw that against Georgia. Quite frankly, you saw it against South Carolina too, but the amount of turnovers and just how bad that offense was didn't really reflect it on the scoreboard. If they can figure out the pass protection, I think you feel decent about Kentucky. But as of right now, there's not a ton of evidence that you're feeling great about this Kentucky offense where we sit right now. Look at Auburn. I think Auburn could emerge as a team to watch. They're turning the football over. I mean, you go and look at the numbers. They're top 25 in the country in terms of yards per play. This offense is better, much better than it was last year. But they still make those mistakes that lose you football games. And at the end of the day, we've seen it against Cal now. Now we've seen it against Arkansas. Is this a team that you're trusting to start making those plays to win you football games consistently? I would argue right now, the answer is probably not. Florida. There are some bright spots about Florida, but there are also, I mean, we know significant question marks. The offensive line continues to not be very impressive. I don't think the defensive line is nearly as good as what we thought it might be, and they're dealing with a ton of injuries on defense. You beat a Mississippi State team that I think just flat out stinks. I think this Florida team has some young talent that maybe can let them get hot. But then you look at the schedule, you look at the inconsistencies that we've seen, and Billy Napier just, I think, handling this program just so poorly in terms of how he's rotating the quarterbacks and what he's doing with the offense. It's a team that's hard to find a ton of confidence with. Vanderbilt, the least talented team in the SEC. Right now, arguably one of the best coach teams in the SEC. I mean, they're going up. They beat Virginia Tech. They take Missouri to overtime. Again, the talent on this Vanderbilt team, we all know they recruit at the bottom of the SEC every single year, but they're doing some things, and they got a gamer in the quarterback spot with Diego Pavia that kind of allows them to hang in football games. You're seeing more fight from Vanderbilt than you're seeing from Mississippi State. And quite frankly, Mississippi State along the lines of scrimmage, it looks like a group of five team. We saw Toledo play Mississippi State and for lack of better terms, like dominate them along the lines of scrimmage. This Mississippi State team now losing their starting quarterback, going to have to go to either a redshirt freshman or a true freshman quarterback with bad line of scrimmage play. I don't have a ton of confidence in this Mississippi State team, and I think it's one of those years where Vanderbilt's not in the basement of the SEC. I think that's Mississippi State. Can Jeff Lebby get it turned around? I think he could, but I don't think he can in 2024 because you just look at the team right now and say there's not a ton that you're hanging your hat on and you're excited about. That'll do it for the SEC power rankings. Again, I can see the SEC power rankings changing in terms of slots, right? Georgia, Alabama, but whoever loses that football game is probably going to stay at a title contender unless we see an absolute disaster on Saturday night, which I'd be surprised if we see. Feeling pretty good about the tiers of the SEC, and quite frankly, feeling pretty good about these rankings. I know there's going to be some people that disagree. Again, I absolutely love it. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all